The great hall of the KRYL Citadel was a forest of shining crystal and cold light. The air hummed with a low, polite chatter, the sound of a powerful empire at rest. Along the high walls, banners of deep purple and silver hung, each marking a great military victory. The KRYL nobles stood tall, their tough, gray skin and sharp features looking carved from stone. They moved with a smooth, strong grace that made the humans in the room seem small and soft. Jin-Ho stood, with the other human delegates, feeling the weight of alien eyes. He adjusted the simple collar of his engineer's uniform. It was practical, a dull blue compared to the glittering robes around him. He was a man built for fixing things, not for parties. Beside him, Sumin watched the room with careful eyes. She was a diplomat, trained to read the meanings behind words and gestures. "Remember," she said quietly, not moving her lips. "They see this as a game. Every word is a move." Jin-Ho gave a small nod. He understood machines better than people. For the last 3 months, he had led the team fixing the KRYL's planetary energy grid. The KRYL were brilliant warriors, but their engineering was loud and forceful. It broke often. Jin-Ho's human team used subtlety and balance. They didn't force the systems. They guided them. The grid now ran with a quiet efficiency it had never known. The king had called it a useful trick. At the end of the hall, on a raised platform, King Valrus sat upon his throne. He was larger than the other KRYL, with a heavy brow and eyes that missed nothing. He stood now, and the hall fell silent. "People of the KRYL Empire," his voice echoed, deep and commanding, "and our guests from Earth." He gestured toward the humans. "Today we mark a successful partnership. Your human ingenuity has served our needs." The way he said ingenuity made it sound like a small, clever tool, not a true strength. Sumin bowed her head slightly, a perfect picture of respect. Jin-Ho followed her lead. The king continued, walking down the steps of his platform. "We are a people of strength, of clear value. A thing is either useful or it is discarded. A being is either strong or it is weak." He stopped before a large cloth-covered table. "For service, there must be a reward, a prize worthy of the effort." With a dramatic sweep of his arm, he pulled the cloth away. The dais underneath gleamed under the hall's lights. On it sat 3 objects. The first was a model of a sleek starship, a symbol meaning the real thing, a vessel faster than any human ship. The second was a single, glowing rock the size of a human head. It was Valex, a mineral so rare a piece that size could buy a city. The third was a simple silver ring. Everyone knew it represented a permanent seat on the Galactic High Council. A voice for humanity among the oldest species. A soft gasp went through the human delegates. These were prizes beyond their dreams. King Valrus smiled, a showing of sharp teeth. He looked directly at Jin-Ho, the lead engineer. "The choice is for the one whose hands did the work." He spread his hands wide, taking in the splendor of his court. "So, human, choose your prize." His tone was grand, but Jin-Ho heard the trap in it. It was a test. If Jin-Ho chose the ship, he would be seen as greedy for power. The Valex rock, greedy for wealth. The council seat, ambitious and political. No matter what he picked, the KRYL would see a confirmation of human desire, of a weakness for material things. They would nod and think, yes, they are simple creatures, motivated by simple wants. Jin-Ho felt every eye in the room on him. He could feel Sumin's tense stillness beside him. He looked at the dazzling prizes, his mind racing. This was not a choice between gifts. It was a choice about how humanity would be seen. His gaze drifted away from the glittering table, stressed. It moved over the proud, watching faces of the KRYL nobles. It moved up toward the high arches of the ceiling where the soft light filtered down. And then, he saw something. In a shadowed balcony, half hidden by a towering crystal pillar, was a smaller figure. It was a KRYL child, sitting in a silent, floating chair. Jin-Ho had seen this child before, from a distance, always alone on that high balcony overlooking the engineering bays. Once their eyes had met. The child had watched him work for a long time. Jinho had simply smiled and given a small wave. The child had not waved back, but had not looked away. Now, the child was here, watching the ceremony from the shadows. No one else looked at him. The king's own eyes, when they flicked toward that balcony, grew hard and cold before quickly turning away. Jinho's engineer mind, trained to see systems and connections, saw a different picture. He saw a child kept apart. He saw a father's shame. He saw not a prize on a table, but a person in the shadows, ignored by everyone. The hall was waiting. King Valrus's smile was turning into a smirk of impatience. Jinho took a slow breath. The logic of the trap was clear. But Jinho was not just a diplomat playing a game. He was a man who fixed broken systems. And he saw a different kind of value, one the KRYLL had clearly missed. He did not step toward the dais. He turned his back on the starship, the mineral, the ring of power. The court murmured in confusion. Calmly, Jinho walked across the polished floor, away from the light and the glory, toward the shadowed pillar. He stopped before the floating chair and the quiet child inside it. He gave the same small, respectful bow he had given the king. Then he turned to face the throne. His voice was not loud, but it was steady in the silent, shocked hall. "I choose this one," he said. "I would like to work with your child, if I may." The silence in the throne room was total. It was a heavy, thick thing, like a fog that had suddenly frozen solid. The grand crystal hall, filled just moments before with pride and ceremony, now felt like a trap about to spring. Every single KRYLL noble stared at Jinho. Their sharp faces showed a mix of pure shock and growing anger. A human had turned his back on the king's gifts. He had walked away from glory and power. And he had stopped before the one thing in the entire empire they all pretended not to see. The child in the floating chair looked up at Jinho. His large, dark KRYLL eyes were wide. They showed no clear emotion, but they were fixed intently on the human's face. His small hands, resting on the arms of his chair, did not move. At the front of the hall, King Valrus stood perfectly still. The proud smile was gone. His face was like a stone mask, but his eyes burned. He looked from Jinho to his child on the balcony and back again. The connection was clear, and it was an insult that Sumin felt her heart beat hard against her ribs. This was worse than any diplomatic mistake she had imagined. This looked like a direct, public insult to the king's family. Her mind raced, searching for a protocol to fix this, but there was none. She could only watch. Jinho remained where he was, standing beside the child's chair. He did not smile. He did not look proud. His face was calm, his posture simply respectful. He waited. It was the king who broke the silence. His voice, when it came, was low. It did not boom. It was a controlled, dangerous sound that carried to every corner of the room. "What?" Valrus said, the words slicing through the air. "Is the meaning of this?" Jinho bowed his head again, a small dip. "You offered a prize for service, your majesty. I have made my choice." A wave of hissed whispers broke out among the nobles. The word choice seemed to hang in the air, absurd and impossible. One of them, a tall KRYLL with silver markings on his shoulders, stepped forward. "He mocks you, my king," he spat. "He chooses the broken thing to shame our generosity." The king raised one hand, and the court fell silent once more. His eyes never left Jinho. "Explain yourself, human. You look upon the greatest treasures my empire can offer. A ship to sail the stars. Wealth to buy worlds. A voice among the powers of the galaxy." He took a step forward, his every movement tight with anger. "And you point to my son?" The word son was said with a strange tone. Not of love, but of possession. And of pain. "I do not point," Jinho said, his voice still quiet but clear. "I choose." I saw him watching while we worked on the energy grid. He watched for many hours, from that balcony. He gestured upward to the high overlook. "A mind that watches and learns has value. I am an engineer. My prize is the chance to work with a mind that interests me." The king's face darkened. He strode forward now, crossing the distance between the throne and the shadowed balcony. The crowd of nobles parted for him like grass before a storm. He stopped a few paces from Jinho and his son. Up close, the king was immense. He looked down at the human, then at his child in the chair. "You speak of a mind," Valrus growled. "You see a chair. You see a body that does not obey. A voice that cannot form words." He leaned closer, his words meant only for Jinho, but everyone heard. "He is locked in silence. His muscles are weak. He is a shadow, a living reminder of imperfection. And you think this is a prize? You think this is equal to a starship?" The cruelty of the words, spoken right in front of the child, made Sumin flinch, but she saw something else. The child, Kai, did not look at his father. He continued to look at Jinho, and Jinho did not look away from the king. "No," Jinho said, and his voice finally had a hard edge in it. Not anger, but firmness. "I do not think he is equal to a starship." He paused, letting that hang. "A starship is a tool. A mineral is a rock. A council seat is a chair. They are things. You offered a prize. You did not say it had to be a thing." He turned his head slightly, looking at the boy in the chair. "This is a person. You see a broken body. I see a student no one has tried to teach. You see a silent voice. I hear a question no one has tried to answer." He looked back at the furious king. "My people have a saying, the most precious gift is an opportunity. You offered me things. I am choosing an opportunity. The opportunity to build something. With him." The king straightened up. The confusion on his face was fighting with the rage. This human was not acting according to any script he understood. This was not greed, or ambition, or mockery. It was something else. Something that made the king's certainty feel shaky as he looked at his son. Really looked at him. The boy met his gaze for a fleeting second. Then his eyes dropped to his own still hands. That small movement, full of a habit of shame, stoked the king's anger again. This was not strength. This was weakness, displayed for his whole court. "To build what?" Valrus asked, his voice dripping with scorn. "What could you possibly build with this?" Jinho looked at the boy, then at the king. He gave the simplest, most dangerous answer possible. "I do not know yet," he said. "That is the point of building. You find out." The king did not shout. The silence was worse. It was a pressure that filled the grand hall, pushing down on everyone. King Valrus stared at Jinho, his stone-like face unreadable. The human engineer had just refused every symbol of Kryll power and honor. Worse, he had pointed to the royal family's deepest secret, their private shame, and called it a treasure. The insult was so vast, so strange, that the court did not know how to react. Finally, Valrus spoke. His voice was flat, all the earlier drama gone. "You wish to work with him." It was not a question. It was a statement, heavy with disbelief. "I do," Jinho said. He had not moved from his spot beside the floating chair. "And what work could that be?" the king asked. "He cannot lift a tool. He cannot speak a command. He observes as a rock observes the rain. It means nothing." Jinho shook his head, a small human gesture. "Observation is the first step of engineering. To fix a system, you must first watch it." He watches. He learns. I saw it. He has learned much already alone. A murmur went through the nobles. They were looking at the child, Kai, with new but unfriendly eyes. They saw not a person, but a problem the human had foolishly embraced. The king's eyes narrowed. He was a ruler, a strategist. He saw a public trap of his own making turned against him. If he denied the human this prize now, after his grand offer, it would look like he went back on his word. It would show weakness. But to allow it was to admit this broken child had a value equal to a starship. It was impossible. He made a decision. A cold, calculating one. "Very well," King Valrus said, his voice echoing in the quiet hall. "You have chosen. A Kryll king honors his word." He said it loudly, for the court to hear. Then his tone dropped, becoming sharp and direct, aimed only at Jinho. But you will understand what you have chosen. You will take your prize. You will have your opportunity. And you will see the truth of its worthlessness. He turned to a guard, a massive KRYLL in polished armor. Take the human engineer and the prince to the West Tower. The empty rooms above the old library. They are to have everything the engineer asks for. Tools, materials, whatever he needs. He looked back at Jinho, a challenge in his eyes. Let no one say we were not generous. You will have your workshop, and you will see. He then addressed the whole room, his authority restored. This audience is concluded. The gifts, he said, glancing at the still gleaming starship model, the mineral, the ring, will remain. Perhaps our human friends will rethink their choice when their project fails. The dismissal was clear. The nobles began to bow and move away, casting confused and scornful looks toward the balcony. The human delegates were gathered by other guards, led away. Sumin caught Jinho's eye for a second. Her face was full of worry, but she gave him a tiny, supportive nod. Then she was gone. The large guard stepped onto the balcony. He did not look at the prince. He looked at Jinho. Follow, he grunted. Jinho turned to Kai. The boy was looking at his own hands again, his face a careful blank. The loud voices, the staring, the anger. It was clearly a familiar storm, and his way to survive was to become still and quiet inside. May I push your chair? Jinho asked softly. The boy's dark eyes flicked up to him. There was a long pause. Then, so slight it was almost not there, the boy's head moved. A fraction of a nod. Jinho placed his hands gently on the back of the smooth, floating chair. It hovered just above the floor. He followed the guard out of the throne room through a small, plain door hidden behind a tapestry. They walked through cold, stone corridors far from the glittering main halls. The sounds of the court faded away. The only noise was the soft hum of the chair and the heavy steps of the guard. They entered a wide, circular tower. A slow ramp spiraled upwards along the wall. The air was cooler here, and dusty. At the top was a heavy door. The guard opened it. The room inside was large and bare. Tall, narrow windows showed a view of the distant, spiky KRWL city. There were a few empty shelves and a wide, solid table. It was clean, but it felt unused and forgotten. This is your place, the guard said. You will stay here with the prince. Food will come. Speak your needs for tools to the keeper at the door. He gave Jinho one last, unreadable look, then turned and left. The door closed with a solid thud. A lock clicked into place from the outside. They were alone. Jinho stood in the center of the empty room. Kai's chair floated silently near the table. Jinho walked to a window and looked out. Then he turned and leaned against the table, facing the boy. He sighed, a small release of tension. Well, Jinho said, his voice gentle. That was a lot of noise, wasn't it? Kai stared at him, waiting. My name is Jinho, he said. I am an engineer. I like to understand how things work, and I like to make things that are useful or beautiful. Or both. He pushed off from the table and walked slowly around the room, his hands in his pockets. This is a good space. Tall ceilings. Strong table. Good light. He stopped and looked at Kai. The king thinks I will fail. The court thinks I am a fool. They think you are nothing. He said the last word plainly, without sugar-coating it. Kai's fingers tightened almost invisibly on the arm of his chair. But I am not a fool, Jinho continued. And I do not think you are nothing. I saw you watching the energy relays. You watched for 3 hours 2 days ago. You were not just looking. You were seeing. You were learning. He came and sat on the floor, cross-legged, so he was below Kai's eye level, not looking down at him. I did not choose you to be kind. I chose you because I saw a potential. A locked door. I am good with locks, but I cannot pick this lock alone. I need you to show me the shape of the key. He reached into a pocket on his leg and pulled out a small, simple object. It was a little metal puzzle, 3 interlocking rings. He held it up. This is not a tool. It is a game, Jinho said. The goal is to take them apart. It is very hard. I have had it for years. Sometimes, when a problem is difficult, I play with it. It helps my hands think. He placed the little puzzle on the flat arm of Kai's floating chair, within reach of his still fingers. I do not know what you can do yet. I do not know how you think. So we start with a question. He nodded to the puzzle. Can you show me? Jinho then stood up and walked back to the window, giving the boy space and privacy. He looked out at the alien sky, his back turned in the quiet room. Kai looked down at the shiny rings. Slowly, with great effort, one of his fingers moved. Trembled, but it touched the cool metal. Time passed in the tower room. The light from the narrow windows moved across the floor, painting long, thin rectangles that slowly shifted and faded. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city and the quiet click of metal. Jinho sat at the wide table, a simple notepad in front of him. He was sketching, not with a sleek digital tool, but with an old pencil he had brought from home. He drew designs for simple machines, gears, levers, pulleys. He was thinking about interfaces, about translation. His eyes would often drift to the other side of the table. The little metal puzzle he had given Kai sat there. The 3 rings were now separated, lying neatly in a row. They had been taken apart. Jinho had not seen how. He had kept his back turned for a long time, as promised. When he finally turned around, the puzzle was solved. Kai's hands were back in their resting position, but his eyes watched Jinho's face, looking for a reaction. Jinho had simply smiled, a real, warm smile. Excellent, he had said. He did not ask how. He just pointed to the rings. Do you want to see if you can put it back together? Now the puzzle remained apart. Kai had not put it back together. That was an answer, too. Taking it apart was the interesting problem. Putting it back together was just a chore. Jinho understood. The boy's mind worked like an engineer's. It sought the solution, the understanding, not the repetitive task. A soft knock came at the door. A slot opened at the bottom, and a tray of food was pushed through. It was KRYLL food, nutrient-dense and bland. There were 2 bowls. Jinho brought the tray to the table. He set one bowl near Kai. It is not exciting, Jinho said, sitting with his own bowl. But it is fuel. An engine needs good fuel to run. He began to eat, making no fuss about it. Kai looked at the bowl, then at Jinho eating. After a moment, a thin, articulated arm unfolded silently from the side of his chair. It was a feeder, a cold piece of medical technology. It moved toward the bowl. Wait, Jinho said gently. The arm stopped. Kai's eyes questioned him. Jinho pointed to Kai's own hand on the armrest. That tool, he said, nodding to the mechanical arm. It is fast. It is efficient. But it is not yours. It does what it is programmed to do. He tapped his own fingers. These are slow. They shake sometimes. They drop things. But they are mine. The connection is direct. The learning is in the mistake. He pushed his own bowl aside. I am not saying you must use your hands to eat. That is not my choice. I am saying we have time. And our project is about building a new connection. Maybe we start with something small. Something that does not matter if we fail. He took a single, soft piece of food from his bowl. He placed it on the smooth table surface, halfway between them. The goal is not to eat it, Jinho said. The goal is to move it. From there to here. He pointed to a spot in front of Kai. He sat back. Use anything you want. Your hand. Your mind, if the chair can do it. The thought. A breath. I do not know your rules. You show me. Kai stared at the morsel of food. It was a stupid, simple thing. Beneath the dignity of a prince, even a broken one. For a long minute, nothing happened. Jinho just waited, his face patient. Then, Kai's right hand trembled. His fingers strained. The effort was huge, visible across his small body. His hand lifted, shaking violently, from the armrest. It moved an inch over the table, muscles quivering. It was a monumental act of will for such a tiny movement. He could not control it. His hand jerked and fell, landing on the table with a soft thud, far from the piece of food. A look of deep frustration flashed in Kai's eyes. He looked away, ashamed. Good, Jinho said. His voice firm. Kai's eyes snapped back to him, surprised. That was not a failure, Jinho said. That was data. You tried method 1. Direct physical control. It is difficult. The connection between your thought and your muscle is noisy, like a bad radio signal. He leaned forward. Now, method 2. You have a chair that floats. It listens to you, yes? How? Does it feel your weight shift? Kai hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Show me, Jinho said. Do not try to pick up the food. Try to move the chair toward the food. Just a little.
Kaifochu said.
His body tensed in a different way. The floating chair, which had been perfectly still, emitted a nearly silent hum. It drifted forward, smooth and precise, a hand's breadth across the floor. It stopped with the table edge now touching his chest. Perfect control, Jinho said, impressed. Clean signal. Now the table is in the way. Your hand is not precise enough yet. The chair is precise, but it cannot manipulate small things. He looked around the room, his eyes bright. So we need a third thing, a tool, a bridge. He got up and went to the door. He spoke through it to the keeper outside. He asked for specific things: thin, rigid tubes, a roll of strong wire, a set of small, gripping clamps from a medical kit, a board to use as a base. Simple things. They arrived within the hour. Jinho brought them to the table. He did not start building. He laid them out in front of Kai. This is the problem, Jinho stated, pointing to the forgotten piece of food. Move it from point A to point B. Here are possible components. I will be your hands. You tell me, show me, communicate to me what to build. We build the bridge together. He saw the doubt in Kai's face. The how was overwhelming. Jinho picked up a tube and a clamp. Start simple. Nod if I am warm. Shake your head if I am cold. Do you want the tube to be the main arm? Nod or shake. Kai looked at the tube. He thought. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. Good. Warm, Jinho said, smiling. Should the clamp be at the end, to pick up the food? Another nod. Okay. Now how does the arm move? Should it pivot from a base? Like this. Jinho held the tube upright on the board. Kai shook his head. No. Should it extend from the side of your chair? A nod. Yes. They worked like that, step by step. Jinho asked yes or no questions. He offered simple choices. Slowly, a crude, ugly but functional arm took shape on the table. It was made of tubes and wire with the medical clamp at the end. It was designed to attach to the side of Kai's chair. The afternoon light was turning orange when they finished the prototype. Jinho fixed it securely to the chair's frame. He controlled it with a simple lever for now. My job first, he said. He manipulated the lever, and the clamp opened, lowered, and neatly picked up the piece of food from the table. He moved it to the spot in front of Kai and released it. He then moved the lever and placed Kai's right hand over it. Your turn. The connection is made. The bridge is built. Send the signal. Kai's hand rested on the lever. His fingers could not grip it, but they could press down. He pushed. The clamp opened. He pushed another way. It closed. His eyes lit up with a fierce, bright fire. It was not the food that mattered. It was the cause and the effect. It was the clear, clean signal. He had moved a thing. With intention. With control. Jinho sat back. See, he said softly. We are not fixing what is broken. We are building a new way. Together. That is our project. For the first time, Kai looked at the human not with watchful caution, but with the focused intensity of a partner. Collaborator. The silent room was no longer a prison. It was a workshop. Weeks turned into a month. The tower room was transformed. It was no longer a bare, forgotten space. It was a workshop, alive with quiet purpose. The wide table was covered in parts. Not the slick, glowing components of KRYLL technology, but simple, fundamental things. There were gears of different sizes, bundles of wire, small motors from human toolkits, sensors, and pieces of smooth, polished wood. Blueprints were not on screens, but drawn large on sheets of paper taped to the walls. They were covered in notes in 2 different handwritings, Jinho's neat print, and a series of sharp, angular symbols that were Kai's. They had developed a language. It did not happen overnight. The yes or no questions had evolved. Jinho had brought a flat panel with a grid of lights. Kai could, with great effort, move a single finger enough to press a sequence. 1 press for yes, 2 for no, 3 for a new idea. It was slow, but it was a start. Then Jinho had an idea. He noticed Kai's eyes. They were always watching, always moving with sharp intelligence. He asked the keeper for an eye-tracking device, the kind used for basic computer control. It was a small, simple thing. When Jinho set it up, everything changed. Kai could look at a symbol on a board, and the device would register it. Jinho made a board with symbols for basic needs: water, food, tired. Then he added symbols for tools: gear, wire, motor, screw. Then concepts: fast, slow, strong, weak, why, how. It was like opening a floodgate. Kai's mind, locked away for so long, rushed out. He could point to gear, then small, then why. Jinho would explain the principle of mechanical advantage. Kai would listen, then point to a part of their growing project with a look that meant, apply it here. Their project was no longer a simple grabber arm. It was a complex, beautiful machine slowly taking shape on a large platform in the center of the room. It was an orrery, a mechanical model of a star system. But this was not a pre-made kit. This was being built from nothing. Kai was the architect. His understanding of space and movement, honed from years of silent observation, was incredible. He designed the orbits in his mind. Jinho was the builder, the hands that translated the silent, eye-pointed instructions into physical form. The central sun was a polished piece of yellow crystal. The planets were spheres of different metals and stones, each chosen by Kai from samples Jinho requested. They were attached to arms of varying length. The challenge was the movement. The gears had to be perfectly calculated to turn at different speeds, all from one power source. The real problem, the heart of their work, was the interface. The orrery was not the final goal. It was the proof. The proof that Kai could control something complex, something beautiful, with the tools he had. They built a custom control panel. It had a series of large, sensitive pads, not buttons. Kai could rest his palm on them. The slightest shift in pressure, a movement he could manage, would send a signal. One pad controlled the power. Another changed the speed. Another could select a single planet to focus on, making its orbit light up. It was a bridge between his mind and the world. More solid than the first grabber arm. More elegant than the eye tracker. One afternoon, they were testing the primary gear assembly. Jinho was underneath the platform, tightening a bolt. Kai was at the control panel, his hand resting on the power pad. A soft knock came at the door. The food slot opened. But it was not the usual keeper's hand. The door itself swung open. King Valrus stood in the doorway. He was alone. He wore no ceremonial robes, just a simple, dark tunic. His expression was unreadable. He had come, as he had promised, to see the failure. He stepped inside and stopped. His eyes scanned the room. They moved over the paper-covered walls, the tables of carefully sorted parts, the tools. They saw the mess and the order of true creation. They saw his son, not in the center of the room as a forgotten object, but at a control panel, intent on a vast, intricate metal structure. He did not see a broken child. He saw a conductor before an orchestra of gears and wires. Jinho slid out from under the platform and stood up. He wiped his hands on his pants but did not bow. Here, in this room, they were not king and subject. They were engineer and visitor. Your Majesty, Jinho said, his voice calm. Valrus did not acknowledge him. He walked slowly into the room, his eyes fixed on the orrery. He saw the care in its construction, the precision. He saw the central crystal sun, catching the light from the window. This is what you have made? Valrus asked. His voice held no scorn, only a deep, wary confusion. This, Jinho said, is what Prince Kai has designed. I am his assistant. He is the engineer. The king's eyes flicked to his son. Kai had not looked away from the orrery. His posture was tense, his hand still on the control pad. "He cannot speak," Valrus said, but it sounded less like a fact now and more like a question. "He speaks," Jinho corrected gently. He pointed to the eye tracker board, to the walls of symbols and notes. "He speaks very clearly. You just never learned his language." Valrus took a step closer to the orrery. He reached out a hand, as if to touch a delicate gear train, but stopped. "What does it do?" Jinho looked at Kai. "Would you like to show him?" Kai's eyes darted to his father's face, then back to the control panel. There was fear there, and a deep old hurt. But there was also something else, a fierce pride in the work. He looked at Jinho and gave a single, sharp nod with his eyes. Jinho walked over and made a final connection, attaching a power cell. He nodded to Kai. Kai looked at his father. Then he looked at the power pad under his palm. He pressed down. A low, smooth hum filled the room. The central crystal began to glow with a soft, captured light. Then, with a series of perfect, ticking sounds, the gear train engaged. The planetary arms began to turn. Each metal and stone planet moved along its track, each at a different, perfect speed. A small light on the tip of each arm lit up, tracing glowing circles in the dim air of the workshop. It was a miniature cosmos. Silent, complex, and breathtakingly beautiful. It was control. It was order. It was a mind made visible. King Valrus stood utterly still. He watched the planets turn. He watched the focused, calm expression on his son's face as Kai shifted his palm to another pad. The orrery sped up, the orbits becoming swift, graceful blurs of light. Then it slowed to a majestic crawl. The king was not seeing a toy. He was seeing a miracle. Not a magical one, but a harder, better kind. A miracle built from patience, from understanding, from wire and will. He saw his son, Kai, not as a broken shadow, but as a creator. The boy had built a universe that obeyed his command. The silence in the room was no longer empty. It was full of the hum of machinery and the loud, screaming truth Valrus could no longer ignore. He had been wrong. The king turned his head slowly from the turning orrery to look at Jinho. The human met his gaze. There was no "I told you so" in Jinho's eyes. There was only the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved, a system working as it should. Valrus looked back at his son, who was now watching him, the control of the orrery forgotten. The fire of creation was still in Kai's eyes, mixed with a nervous question. The king of the HFY Empire, a man who valued strength above all, found his voice thick. He could not form the words he needed, so he did the only thing that felt true. He looked at the world his son had built, and he gave a slow, deep, respectful nod. The king's silent nod hung in the air of the workshop. The moment stretched, fragile and heavy. Kai watched his father, the fear in his eyes slowly mixing with a confused hope. Jinho stayed quiet, giving them this space. Finally, King Valrus turned his head. He looked at the orrery, at the tools, at the walls covered in their shared language. His gaze was different now, not inspecting for failure, but seeing the evidence of a mind at work. "How?" The single word was rough, forced from his throat. It was not a demand. It was a genuine, bewildered question. He was asking how any of this was possible. Jinho walked to the table and picked up the first, simple metal puzzle. The one with the 3 rings. He held it up. "We started with this," he said. "A simple problem. He solved it. That was the first answer. It told me he could see solutions." He put the puzzle down and gestured to the room. Everything else was just building a better way to ask the next question. Valrus stepped closer to the Aura's control panel. He looked at the pressure pads, then at his son's hands resting beside them. "He cannot press a button," the king said, his voice low. "He doesn't need to," Jinho said. "The machine listens to what he can do. A shift in weight, a change in temperature. We built an ear for a new kind of voice." The king reached out, his large, battle-worn hand hovering over the control panel. He did not touch it. Felt sacred. And this language? Jinho pointed to the eye tracker board. At first, yes and no. Then symbols. He learns fast. He needed a way to ask why and how. So we made one. He paused. He has asked many why questions about the energy grid. His ideas are very good. Valrus absorbed this. His son, the Broken Prince, had thoughts about the Empire's power systems. He looked at Kai. Is this true? Kai's eyes darted to the symbol board. He looked at a sequence, and the tracker highlighted it. True. Then he looked to another series. The Eastern Relay is inefficient. The king read the symbols, his lips parting slightly. The Eastern Relay was a chronic problem. His best engineers argued about it. He has been watching from his balcony for a long time, Jinho said softly. He sees patterns. A strange feeling washed over King Valrus. It was not pride, not yet. It was the dizzying feeling of having overlooked a treasure in his own house. He had seen a broken body. He had never imagined the mind inside, working, calculating, all this time that he turned fully to face his son. The action was stiff, unfamiliar. He was a king, not a father who knew how to have this conversation. Kai, he said. The name felt strange in his mouth. He usually did not say it. This work, it is yours? Kai looked at Jinho, a flicker of uncertainty there. Jinho gave a small, encouraging nod. Kai looked back at his father. His hand moved to the control panel. He pressed a sequence dot on the orrery. All the planets stopped. Then only a single copper planet began to move, its path lighting up. It was the third planet from the sun. He had designed its orbit to be slightly elliptical, a detail of complexity Jinho had helped him engineer but had not suggested. It was Kai's own touch that he looked at his father, as if to say, see? Valrus saw. The specificity, the deliberate choice. This was not a child's toy. It was a statement. I am here. I think. I create. The king's stern face struggled with an expression it was not used to making. He looked old suddenly. The weight of his mistake was a physical thing. I was told, Valrus began, his voice gravelly, that your condition meant your mind was also affected, that you were unaware. Jinho did not let the anger he felt show. He spoke calmly. It is a common mistake, to see a body that does not work like others, and to assume the person inside is not home. My people have done it too. It is easier than the hard work of finding the door. And you found the door? Valrus said, looking at the human. No. Jinho shook his head. He showed me where it was. I just helped him build a key. Silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence. The angry, tense quiet was gone. This was a quiet full of things being understood, of a world tilting on its axis. King Valrus walked slowly to the window. He looked out at his gleaming, powerful city. He had built an empire on strength, on clear lines of useful and useless. Now, in this dusty tower room, that simple idea lay in pieces that he spoke without turning around. The prizes, they are still in the throne room. The ship, the Valix, the council seat. He turned to look at Jinho. The offer stands. You may choose one. A real choice this time, not a test. Jinho glanced at Kai. The boy was watching him, a faint worry in his eyes. Jinho smiled at him, a smile that said, do not worry. That he looked back at the king. Thank you, your majesty, but I already have my prize. Valrus followed his gaze to his son, to the workshop. He understood. The human had not wanted a thing. He had wanted a project, purpose, and in doing so, he had given the king's son a voice, and had given the king a truth he desperately needed. What happens now? Valrus asked. It was a question for Jinho, but his eyes were on Kai. Now, Jinho said, we keep building. The orrery is almost complete, but there are other projects. Kai has ideas for a better irrigation controller for the southern farms. He thinks the design is inefficient. A prince thinking about water for farms, not about conquest or glory. Valrus nodded slowly. It was a new kind of strength for his empire. A quiet, practical strength from a mind he had cast aside. You will stay? The king asked Jinho. As his teacher? As his partner, Jin-ho corrected gently. If he wishes it. Kai's hand moved on the panel. The orrery sprang back to life, all the planets moving in their complex harmony. His answer was clear. King Valrus looked at the two of them, the human and his son, surrounded by their quiet, ticking creation. He saw the partnership. He saw the value he had been too blind to see. He did not say sorry. The word was too small for the canyon of his mistake. Instead, he gave another slow nod, deeper this time. It was a pledge, an acknowledgement. Then you will have what you need, the king said. His voice was the voice of a ruler, but the meaning was of a father. This room, it is his now, and you are both welcome in any hall of the citadel. He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the frame, and looked back one last time at the turning planets, at his son's face illuminated by their gentle light. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. No lock clicked this time. 3 cycles later, the great hall was full again. The same crystal walls, the same banners, the same Carewell nobles in their fine robes. But the air was different. There was a curiosity now, a quiet buzz of uncertainty. The story of the human engineer and the silent prince had spread through the citadel in whispers. No one knew what to expect. King Valrus sat on his throne. He did not smile, but the harsh lines of his face were softer. At his right side, in a place of honor that was never empty, stood his eldest son and heir, a strong warrior like his father. But on his left side, a new space had been made. There, floating beside the throne, was Kai. He was not hidden in shadows. He sat upright in his chair, which gleamed with a new, polished sheen. Attached to its arm was a small, clean control panel. Jin-ho and Sumin stood with the human delegates before the throne. Sumin watched everything with careful diplomatic eyes. Jin-ho stood calmly, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore a simple engineer's tunic. People of Carewell, King Valrus began, his voice filling the hall. We gather to close the matter of our human allies' service. He gestured to the dais beside him. The starship model, the glowing Valex rock, and the silver council ring still sat there, untouched. The offered prizes remain. The human's choice, however, has been made. All eyes turned to Kai. The nobles stared, some with pity, some with discomfort, many with simple confusion. They saw the same broken prince. They did not see what the king now saw. Valrus continued. The human Jin-ho chose not a thing, but a challenge. He chose to work with my son, Prince Kai. He said the name clearly, giving it weight in the court. I believed this was a foolish choice. I was wrong. A soft ripple of surprise went through the crowd. A Carewell king did not admit error. The human did not seek to fix what he saw as broken, the king said. He sought to build a bridge to a mind he saw waiting on the other side. He looked at Jin-ho. Engineer, you have completed your service. The original offer stands. Will you take a prize from the dais? Sumin held her breath. This was the final test. To take a prize now would undo everything, proving the Carewell right, that all beings eventually succumb to greed. To refuse again might insult the king. Jin-ho stepped forward. He bowed respectfully to the king. Then he turned and bowed slightly to Prince Kai. The gesture was noticed by everyone. Your Majesty, Jin-ho said, his voice clear. You are generous. But the greatest prize an engineer can receive is a good problem and a good partner to solve it. You gave me both. I am satisfied. The king nodded, as if he had expected this answer. Then I will offer a new thing. Not a prize, but a position. Will you stay as a royal engineer and advisor to Prince Kai? To continue your work, with our full support. This was new. A human in the Carewell royal court? The nobles murmured. But no one dared speak against the king's clear will. Jin-ho did not look at Sumin. He did not hesitate. He looked at Kai. The prince met his gaze and gave a single, definite nod with his eyes. I would be honored, Jin-ho said. Then it is done, said King Valrus. He stood up from his throne. He walked not to Jin-ho, but to the dais holding the 3 glittering prizes. He picked up the small silver ring, the symbol of the Galactic Council seat. He held it up. "This," he announced to the hall. "This voice among powers was offered. It was refused for something deemed of greater value." He turned and faced his son. "A voice must be heard. Therefore, I decree that Prince Kai will be the KRYLL Empire's voice on all matters of science, engineering, and infrastructure. His counsel will guide our building. His advisor, Jin-Ho, will be at his side." The announcement was a thunderclap. The silent prince, now a chief voice? It was a revolution. But the king's face showed it was not a request for debate. It was law. Valrus then walked to his son. He did not kneel, but he bent slightly, placing a hand on the arm of Kai's chair. It was a public gesture of recognition, of connection. "The floor," the king said, his voice quieter, meant for his son but heard by all, "is yours." Every eye in the hall was on Kai. He seemed small in his chair. For a moment he looked like the old, frightened boy. Then his jaw tightened. He looked at his father, then at Jin-Ho. Jin-Ho gave him a small, confident smile. Kai's hand moved to his control panel. He pressed a sequence. From the sides of the hall, for serving bots rolled forward. They were simple KRYLL machines used for carrying heavy items. But they moved with a new, synchronized grace. They stopped in the center of the hall, forming a square. Then, from a high balcony, a hologram flickered to life. It was not a grand image. It was a schematic, a detailed, moving diagram of the Citadel's water reclamation system. A section flashed red, showing a critical inefficiency. Kai's fingers danced on his panel. Words began to scroll beneath the hologram, clear and sharp in the KRYLL language. "The loss here is 18% per cycle. The solution requires a rerouting of primary pipes, not more pressure. Design follows." A new, cleaner, more elegant design appeared next to the old one. The math was flawless. The solution was simple, brilliant, and would save vast amounts of energy and water. The hall was utterly silent, but now it was the silence of awe. The nobles, many of whom oversaw such systems, stared. They saw not a disabled child. They saw an intellect. They saw a prince solving a real problem that had plagued them for years. Kai's eyes scanned the room. He saw the shock, the dawning respect. He made one final input. The words on the hologram changed. "This is my first report." Then the hologram faded. The serving bots rolled away. Kai's hands returned to rest on his chair. He was breathing a little faster, but his head was high. He had spoken, not with a voice from his throat, but with a voice from his mind, amplified by his will and his tools. King Valrus looked out at his stunned court. He saw the understanding finally dawning on their faces. The human had not chosen a worthless prize. He had chosen a locked chest and, with patience and respect, had helped to open it, revealing a treasure that would strengthen the Empire in ways no starship ever could. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The gesture was firm and proud. Jin-Ho watched from the floor, standing beside Su-min. She leaned in, her voice a whisper of pure relief and triumph. "You chose a child." Jin-Ho shook his head, his eyes on the prince beside the king, on the future they would now build together. "No," he said quietly. "I chose a partner, and we chose to build a new kind of voice." In the bright light of the KRYLL throne room, the meaning of strength had been rewritten, not by a sword, but by a steady hand, a silent mind, and the simple, powerful act of seeing value where others saw none.